Greetings, friends, and welcome to the inaugural edition of the Shumate News Forum. So, in this space each week, I'll be bringing you what I hope to be a provocative and irreverent look at the news and what's going on in our world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, I'm going to be looking at news in general, international news, national news, as well as more specifically news about the South and Arkansas, which is where I live. And I'm also going to have some emphasis on covering issues in higher education and in the field of journalism itself. And indeed, today I am coming to you from beautiful Little Rock, Arkansas. So just an explanation of who is this dude and why has he popped up on my YouTube. What is his claim to fame here? I've worked as a journalist for more than 30 years in a variety of places, including working for 10 years at CNN's world headquarters in Atlanta. But this was back before I think things have sort of gone off the cliff at CNN, in my humble opinion, in recent years, and I think are about to go even further off the cliff if it's merged with the company that owns CNN or CBS. And so I have moved into being a journalism professor as well as working as a journalist. And so I like to keep my oar in the water in terms of journalism so that I can kind of prove to my students that, I'm doing and not just telling them what to do. We're going to start off this week with a really strange episode, one of the oddest things I think that's happened in a while. And that is that the Secretary of Defense has decided that men in the military apparently don't have enough testosterone. So they're actually now going to start offering them checking their testosterone if they're 30 years old or more. And if they have low T, then they're going to treat them, offer them treatment. So all sorts of ironies abound here. First, of course, that this would be gender-affirming care, which is something that Pete Hegseth is supposed to be, and the Trump administration are supposed to be against. It does sort of bring up images of the hormone police going after people. It seems to me, if I were in the military, I might think twice about having my testosterone checked, knowing that if it's low, they might force me out of the military. But that's just me. So that is was a very strange episode this week. More tragic and more troubling, what we've seen this week has been more violence by ICE agents. So there was a shooting in Texas. There was a shooting in Maine, and there was an immigrant in Florida who was hit and killed by a semi while trying to get away from ICE agents. And so this has caused a big kerfluffle again, as we might know. This had sort of died down after ICE left Minneapolis, but clearly ICE has not stopped wanting to do its enforcement operations. And among the casualties in Maine has been Susan Collins' re-election campaign. She is getting lots and lots of grief for this, primarily because she's the head of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, which pushed through a bill giving ICE mountains and mountains of cash to do these sorts of operations. But I think the thing to me that's really being missed in the coverage of this, and often gets missed in these situations, is that no matter how you feel about the validity of the Trump administration's roundup of immigrants, and no matter how you might think about whether police officers, the officers involved in this are in any way, shape, or form justified in their use of deadly force, I think we all have to admit that whenever a traffic stop results in somebody being killed, it's a mistake. That systems have failed and that should never happen. that we should never have a situation like that. And when we do have a situation like that, it behooves us to say, okay, why has this failure happened? And what do we need to do to stop it from happening in the future? And I do think that's something that is not really happening here. And even if you don't think that the ICE agents did anything wrong here, still something went awry. And we really need to think about that and work on that. And in fact, since Trump came back into office, 10 people have now been killed by ICE agents in this country on the streets of America, in less than 2 years. So, something really needs to be looked into here. And what was sort of interesting about this to me was that after this happened in Maine, ICE actually came out and said, we're going to stop doing traffic stops, which begs the question of why in the world ICE agents were doing traffic stops anyway. And then Donald Trump gets on social media and says, oh, no, we're going to continue to do the traffic stops. So we don't really know, I think at the present time, what the status of that really is. Also in the news this week has been data centers, which is actually something that I've been covering a lot here in Arkansas, because we've had a lot of these data center project things come forward here in Arkansas. And one of the things that's, I think, happening is that as states where there are a lot of data centers have sort of seen all of the problems with resources and higher power bills and pollution, they've started restricting these projects. And I think big tech and the developers who are trying to put these projects together are increasingly looking at poorer, redder states that they think are more amenable to this. So this is sort of why we're seeing this move into Arkansas, where our state leaders have absolutely embraced the whole concept of having data centers as far as the eye can see. In New York this week, the governor basically put a moratorium on data centers. And it was the first statewide moratorium that anybody has done. I think there will be more. And one of the things that makes me think there will be more is there is a news organization called Heat Map News, which actually covers climate change issues. And they've done a lot of interesting polling around the issue of data centers. And it's really sort of fascinating that in September, so that's just 9 months ago, the American public was split on data centers. In a poll, they were asked the question, would you support putting a data center near where you live? 43% said yes, and 42% said no. So it was fairly evenly split. 9 months later, in June, 71% said no, and only 21% said yes. There's a 49% shift in the public attitude on data centers in 9 months, which is remarkable and stunning. And it is all across the board. So in that poll, 63% of Trump voters said that they would not want a data center near where they live. The data centers are unpopular across all political groups, all demographic groups, all income groups, all educational groups. They are unpopular with urban, suburban, and rural voters. So in a weird sort of way, in an era where Americans tend to seem to be very hopelessly divided about things, data centers is actually something that can bring us together in our outrage that these things are continuing to be built. We actually have a couple of these here in Little Rock. One is being built in the city. The other's in a rural area. You won't be surprised to know a rural area where most of the people who live there are black is where they want to put this huge data center. And we had our local governments here basically approve these things, give preliminary approval and tax breaks for these things without having any idea of the details of any of this, not even knowing who the big tech firms were that were going to build this. One of these data centers here in Little Rock is being built by Google, But the other one is actually being built by a company that builds data centers and then essentially sells them or leases them to big tech. And they still haven't said who they're going to, that this is who's actually going to run this thing if it ever actually comes to pass. But they've run into huge opposition, and there's been pressure on our local officials to impose moratoriums. And our news story this week has been that the county government in Little Rock, so it's called Pulaski County, has imposed a moratorium on data centers. And it turns out that the woman who wrote the moratorium on data centers was actually helped in writing the bill by the electric company, which has been trying to push the project. So as I sort of opined online, taking advice from the power company on data center regulation is sort of like taking advice from Satan on sin. Satan sort of has a vested interest in there being more sin. So Satan is not exactly a objective observer in this circumstance. So it will be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. But clearly, in a democratic country where opposition to data centers is across the board, it's going to be increasingly difficult for big tech to push these things through, and they are going to need to find a plan B if they don't have a plan B. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about this week about a couple of prospective 2028 Democratic candidates who have been doing some interesting campaigning of late. And this would be Pete Buttigieg, the former Secretary of Transportation in the Biden administration, and Andy Beshear, who is the two-term Democratic governor of Kentucky. And they have been campaigning in the midterm elections, but they have been focusing really on coming into red states and campaigning in congressional races that are surprisingly competitive in a Democratic year, and races where you wouldn't think that they would be competitive at all. So, and also endorsing in those races. So Buttigieg was in Iowa and Nebraska. He was also here in Little Rock a few weeks ago, campaigning for a guy named Chris Jones, who is running for Congress in the second congressional district in Arkansas, which is essentially central Arkansas. Although Republicans in the legislature to make the seat more Republican, took some black folks out of the district and then snaked it all the way up into the mountains, almost 100 miles from here. So it's as Republican as they could make it, and it's still competitive. Chris Jones, interesting guy. He is actually literally a rocket scientist. He has an MIT in physics and worked for NASA. And should he be elected, he would be the first black congressman from Arkansas since Reconstruction, or should he be elected, rather. So Buttigieg was here with him. He also got endorsed by Andy Beshear this week. So, if he wins, he'll have a choice to make in the 2028 election if those two guys are running against each other. But it seems to be, a strategy on behalf of both of these candidates to sort of emphasize building up Democratic strength in places where Democrats aren't perceived to have a chance at all, which I think is just kind of an interesting strategy that we'll see going forward, and we'll get to see a little bit whether it works or not. Beshear was also in the news this week for another interesting reason. So most of you are probably aware that there's a parlor game sweeping America is, where's Mitch McConnell? Is Mitch McConnell still with us among the living? And he hadn't been heard from in months. Very, very sketchy information about his condition, which fueled all sorts of internet speculation. So they came out with what they were trying, I think, to tamp the speculation down. It was a photograph of him sitting in a hospital bed with his wife, and a statement from him, but there was no actual video of Mitch McConnell. And actually, I think their proof of life attempt here backfired and launched a whole new set of conspiracy theories. But Beshear basically has been kind of walking an interesting line here because he has not wanted to, come out and criticize McConnell for being ill. McConnell's now saying he was injured in a fall. There was a report from the 911 people who came and hauled him away from his house in Louisville that he had suffered cardiac arrest. But what Beshear has been saying is basically, I've been trying to get information about McConnell's status, and nobody's talking to me. And this week he came out and said, essentially, while I appreciate his desire for privacy, he has a job, and you wouldn't not show up at your job for a month and not call your boss and not expect your boss to know anything about it. So he's sort of been trying to put the pressure on that a little bit to see if we can get some information about Mitch McConnell's whereabouts. And so here in Arkansas this week, another thing that's been going on here, and I particularly wanted to mention this because our governor has a national profile. So our governor is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and you will all recall that where she was launched into politics was that she was Donald Trump's press secretary, and she stood at the White House podium and prevaricated prodigiously for 2.5 years or something like that. Then she came back to Arkansas and became the governor. So she's running for re-election, but she is off on a European jaunt. So each and every year since she's been governor, she's gone on a European trip in the summertime. And she takes her aides, she takes her kids, she takes her husband, and they all decamp for the continent, which is, given that in the summertime in Arkansas, it's 112 degrees a lot of the time. It would be nice to be in Switzerland, I suppose. So she's off to Europe again. But one of the interesting things about that for us in Arkansas is that she actually got the legislature to change our Freedom of Information law to allow her basically not to disclose the true costs of any of this travel. Under the guise that for security, that disclosing the details of her travel, particularly how many security agents she's taking with her on these trips and how much we're paying for it, would jeopardize her security, and the security of her family. She's very quick to invoke her children in this conversation, and so this is sort of like a summertime thing in Arkansas. Our governor travels, and we don't know how much money that she's spending. Sort of interesting, though, that she complains a lot about the need to keep everything secret to protect her family, but then she puts her kids in her television re-election commercials. Not consistency from Governor Sanders on that score. So that's going to wrap up our time together on Shumate News Forum this week. Again, thank you for watching. If you would like to follow me on social media, on X, Threads, and Blue Sky, it's at Shumate News Forum, all spelled out. On Facebook, actually, though, that's too long. So it's at Shumate News FRM. We're leaving the vowels out on Facebook. All right, thank you. I hope everybody has a great day.